just a second for it to actually. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Power Lunch episode in the 1000 Conversations About the Future series. This is a project of the Ithaca Green New Deal that aims to engage all of our favorite people, you all, in a conversation about the future of Ithaca. So as always, I'm your lovely and charming host, Rebecca Evans, Sustainability Planner with the City of Ithaca. And also returning is the brilliant Lariah, who will be managing our YouTube chat. So if you have any questions or comments, we encourage you to interact with us via the chat. Lariah will make sure that our speakers receive and respond to your questions. Today, we're super lucky to have two masterminds in their own right that are joining us to talk about something that really very few of us understand, and somehow the two of them have made a career out of it. Today, we're going to talk about how cities can and do work together to reach their crazy, ambitious, and inspiring goals. So with us today, we have Mayor Satya Rhodes-Conway, mayor for the city of Madison, Wisconsin, and local history maker on a number of fronts. And I will say the least of which I think is securing a really badass electric fire truck for Madison's fleet. We're also joined by our very own City of Ithaca Chief of Staff, Faye, who I'm convinced has connections in every single corner of state and federal government and a tireless champion for the Ithaca Green New Deal. So welcome to you both. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this conversation. We're so grateful and so lucky to have you here. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to both of you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, Faye.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. It's crazy. I've been in this position since October, so I'm kind of brand new to Ithaca. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say about Ithaca.
Well, that's so. And so did you just move to Ithaca for the job?
I live in Binghamton, so I'm close. But brand new to the Ithaca way of life. I only came here for wineries and to eat. So, Ithaca is so much more, and I'm learning about, everything that Ithaca has to offer. So it's really exciting.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, there are worse reasons to come to Ithaca, I have to say. Well, that's so interesting because, I grew up in Ithaca and was there through high school. A year after, I went to college somewhere else, and then I came back for a couple of years. And of course, my mom still lives in Freeville, and is very involved in the whole Ithaca scene. So I'm back, once a year-ish, pandemic willing. And so I have, sort of deep Ithaca roots, but haven't actively lived there for decades. And just sort of watch, all the amazing things that are going on from afar. But I feel like there's a lot of parallels between Madison and Ithaca. I mean, Ithaca is a lot smaller than Madison is, but we're both, fairly progressive college towns. And I think our population is heavily influenced by the presence of our universities. We're both on large lakes, which I think from a stormwater perspective influences, but also from a quality of life perspective and a recreation perspective. And so, yeah, and I think, to the theme of today, one of the things that I've found is that cities really face a lot of the same issues, across states, across size of city, across type of government. We're all struggling with a lot of the same issues, particularly with respect to climate.
Yes, I will agree with that.
So what are you working on in Ithaca?
All kinds of crazy things. I think that one of the biggest things, obviously, the electrification program, the Green New Deal, that kind of stuff, trying to engage the community with some of these programs has been, just trying to get information, such a high level of education sometimes is involved in, some of these things. And I think that even educating our department heads or, what we do on this is how electrification can happen, or this is how you can get a piece of machinery that will be helpful for this. And even as far as, building parking garages and having, some kind of system for those when it comes to it. So we're doing so many other great economic development projects. And we did just recently get some earmarks, which is always nice to do.
That's great.
So that's super exciting. And I worked for Congress previously. And so it was kind of fun. I never got earmarks while I was there. So it was super, super fun to know that they exist and that they're coming to our community. So I was really excited. I really want to hear about, some of the things that you've done with, especially with the fire trucks and how you can engage the community into getting involved more with these projects.
Yeah. Well, let me say, first of all, that I am super jealous of the building electrification work. I have to say, I'm beside myself. I wish we could be doing that here. And really one of the things that holds us back is the state surround, the state legislative situation here in Wisconsin. And you all have a better set of incentives from your state and, more flexibility, which I'm constantly jealous of. I know that, New York State isn't perfect by any means, but I think in that respect, it's friendlier. So I'm watching closely the work that you guys are doing on that, and with a lot of envy and a little bit of like, okay, what could we do? Even though we don't have the same situation, what pieces could we learn from? But yeah, we're doing, so, I've been in office since spring of 2019. And one of the things that I ran on and that I promised to work on is responding to climate change. Madison experienced some really, really bad flooding, not while I was in office, before I was in office. But I think it really sort of woke us all up to that the impacts of climate change are coming and are serious. And, we have to both be prepared from an infrastructure and resilience point of view, but we also have to really take seriously the work to reduce our emissions. And so we've done a number of things, on the built environment front. We're preempted by the state on building codes. So most of our work has been on our own buildings.
Okay.
But we have done some work on stormwater, making sure that new construction is going to be better prepared in the event of flooding. But we require that new buildings that are funded by the city be built to a LEED Silver standard minimum. We're generally getting gold or platinum. We're also doing, when we do renovations, it's all about energy efficiency. And one of my favorite programs here in Ithaca is, it's called Green Power. And we are training young people that are underrepresented in the trade. So mostly women and people of color. Right. Who come in, they learn how to install solar panels by installing solar panels on city buildings.
That's amazing.
It's awesome. I love this program. And then they have their certification and they can go out and get a job in the solar industry if they want, or they can stay and work for us in our public works. Which, as one of the big challenges for cities is to diversify our public works agencies. And so we've really taken a sort of grow your own approach to that. But you asked about the fire truck. Our fleet superintendent is very committed to sustainability, very committed. And so he is working hard to transform our entire fleet. We are, on the sort of light duty cars, we're just buying electric vehicles basically. Right. But then, as you know, it's harder with some of the heavier duty vehicles. They don't either make electric versions, or they're sort of untested. So we are looking at, heavy duty EVs. The latest one that we're exploring is a garbage truck.
Okay.
So we'll be looking at that, but we're also working for the heavy duty vehicles on going to 100% biodiesel.
Oh, that's great.
So we've got a partnership going with some of the biodiesel companies to test out, and does that work all winter? And can we make that a sustainable thing in all senses of the word? But the fire truck, this is actually super exciting. So it's built by Pierce Manufacturing, which is located in Wisconsin, and it's who we buy our fire trucks from, and have for years. And they started making an EV option, and asked us if we would like to test it. And so this is a prototype. It's not available. It's not on the street yet.
Yeah.
And so we said, yes, of course, we would like to test it, please. So it's out at one of our fire stations and going on calls. And in fact, those green power trainees installed the charging system for it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's so cool.
And we've got this partnership to share data with the manufacturer. So they get to come and, go over the truck whenever they want, and we share all the data with them, and, from the calls, and so far it's going great. Once they get into production, I was actually talking with our fire chief not that long ago, and we both were saying, like, there's no way that you go back, right? Like, you don't go back to a diesel after you know that an electric works. And so we've got dibs on the first 2 or 3 that will come off their production line to bring into service here in Madison. I'm just really excited. We've also done something where we're equipping our ambulances with anti-idling technology. So if they go on a call, they don't like to turn it off because they might need the power. And so it basically generates electricity without running the diesel engine, which is great. And sort of looping again back to that theme of municipal cooperation and talking across municipalities. All of this work on our fleet, we convened a couple of years ago now, a group of local leaders. So it's myself, it's the county executive here in Dane County, and then the mayors or village presidents from like our surrounding cities, basically, in Dane County, and who are interested. So it's totally voluntary.
Right.
But we have over several years shared with them all this work that we're doing on our fleet, and supported them in starting to do that anti-idling on the ambulances and to purchase EVs. And because we have one of the larger fleet agencies in the region, and they have the capacity to do all this research, right? And to track down who are the manufacturers and what's the right technology and what do you need to know to purchase it and to maintain it. And so we just turn around and share that with other local governments, so they don't have to, because their fleet department might be one person. Right. And so we don't want them to have to go through all of the reinventing of the wheel. When we know this information, we could just share it with them. So that's one of the ways in which on fleet and on solar and on a couple of other stormwater stuff, we're trying to share out our knowledge with other local governments in the region.
Well, I get asked about that all the time because people always say, do you collaborate with anybody else? And I always laugh because you know how it is. Like, it's constant. You are constantly trying not to reinvent the wheel. And what I find that when somebody says, oh, we already do that, I'm like, why didn't I know that was how it was? And I think that has been kind of interesting being in Ithaca, is that some of this stuff is the brainchild of Ithaca in a lot of ways. Yeah. So there really isn't that many places to go to get information sometimes. And I think that's what has been so helpful, with some of the connections that you make as you travel your life throughout the world. I try to save people's cards, or, back when we were meeting in person, right? When everybody had their cards, their business cards. Now I said, do we really even need business cards anymore? Like, who have I passed one to lately? But I try to save everybody so that I might need them to ask them a question in the future. And it has paid off a lot. I think that's one of the things that we have, BAE Systems, which is here, which does a lot of work with electric buses. So when I worked in Broome County, one of our projects was that we, same as you, right, prototype for an electric bus. So it was really helpful to see how it worked without kind of committing the funds to it. And then, but at the same time, it was so exciting. We automatically wanted like 4 more. Right. So we're like, how quickly can we get these? Yeah. So it has been, I think that the whole idea, and you're right, New York State has been very supportive of a lot of this stuff. And when COVID happened, everything kind of switched to, oh, we need broadband, we got to get services. We have to, and I wasn't sure whether we would get back to this, that's back to the real issues of what communities really need. So it was super exciting to kind of be like, okay, we made it kind of through, and now we're starting to talk more about this stuff. So I don't know how it's been out there, but that's how it's been here.
Yeah, so, it's very similar. I mean, I felt a little bit like when COVID hit that, we just got, it's not even sidetracked, right? But things were just put on pause.
Oh yeah.
Right. And we just didn't have the bandwidth to work on everything that we had been working on. And in particular, I had literally, I was just about to announce a whole bunch of housing initiatives when COVID hit. And, we were planning this big in-person event, and and we were like, oh man, we can't do any of this. And we didn't even announce it. And, and so everything just got put on pause, and we dealt with COVID, and we did pick it up, basically a year later.
Well, that's how it was. Right. Yeah. And I remember being on Capitol. So we knew we were probably going into lockdown. And so they were like, come down and get the computer. So I drove down to DC and got a bunch of laptops for us. And I had my son with me at the time, and he was, 12. And I said, stay in the car, stay in the car, I'm going to run. And then I realized there were hardly any cars on the street. There was not one congressperson to be found. Everybody had left. And then we drove back, and it was like within a couple hours we were on lockdown.
Yeah.
And so and then being the person that, 6 counties wanted information from, because the federal government all of a sudden was at the forefront of all this stuff, and disseminating that information and getting it going was crazy. But
yeah.
So not to change the subject, but I'm changing the subject. So how did you end up in Madison?
Oh, so I, right. So I said, I was in Ithaca through just after high school. I went to ACS. I took a year after I graduated. I went to Smith in Massachusetts. I came back for a couple of years, and then I went out to the University of California, Irvine for graduate school. And I thought I was going to be a research scientist. I thought I was going to go get a PhD in ecology. And for a number of reasons, that did not happen. I squeaked out a master's but I did along the way, I discovered that I enjoyed teaching. And so I was teaching at UC Irvine and sort of like, what's next, looking around. I had been in California for about 6 years, and so I was like applying for other teaching jobs at community colleges, and I was looking for, I don't know what. And most of the things were like, I could get an offer to teach a class, but not, like a full-time gig. And everything else, I had too much degree and too little experience. And so I was finally like, fine, I'm just going to start applying for internships, and like, maybe I can get some of this experience that I don't have and be more competitive. And I just kept getting turned down by all sorts of things. And I finally applied for an internship in Madison, and just wrote the quirkiest cover letter. Like, I was done. I was like, I don't care, whatever. I'm not getting anything anyway. So I wrote a super quirky cover letter, and I got a response back. Was like, so you want to come and intern for us? So I came. It was an organization, it was a nonprofit that did state level environmental policy. So working with state legislators all across the country, just happened to be based in Madison. And I came for a 3-month internship. And I, about a month in, went into my boss's office and said, you know what? I really like it here in Madison. I like this job. I think you should hire me permanently. And he said, that's funny, because I've been thinking about that.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So he found first a limited term position for me, and then a full-time permanent position for me. And I was there for, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 years. And then I got a tip to apply for a job at the university at a center. We call it a think and do tank at the university. And so I applied for that, got that job, and ended up working at UW for 13 years running the Mayor's Innovation Project, which is a national learning network for mayors and their senior staff, focused on equity, sustainability, and democracy. And I was there for 13 years, like I said, and served for 6 of those years. I served in the city council also, and then decided to run for mayor. So I've been in Madison for about 20 years now. But it was just a quirk, it was just like luck,
That's how it happens.
That's how it happens. Yep. But, circling back around, like when I first moved here, it just felt comfortable, right? In a way, it felt familiar in a way that California didn't. I mean, California is lovely in many, many ways. But Madison looks like Ithaca, like the rhythm of the streets and the trees and the lakes, and it just felt like sort of viscerally familiar to me, which I think was a lot of what I love about it, and why I wanted to stay.
That's great. Such a great story. Love it.
Yeah. So I'm interested in how, I mean, Ithaca has been such a leader with the Green New Deal and the electrification work in particular, but I'm interested in how, like, what's your relationship like with the county, with surrounding cities and villages and towns, or like, who do you, I mean, you said before, and it's absolutely true, right? We totally steal ideas from each other, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, we totally try and learn from each other in city government. And so I'm interested in who you look to or who you work with, both sort of locally and then also nationally.
Yeah, so we have I think that my perspective on it was kind of different when I came here, because coming from, so I lived in, I think, 8 different states, a couple countries. Wow. And just by life happening, you end up, I was married to somebody that was in the military and ended up in all these places where I was looking for things to do. And some of those things led me down a couple roads. So every time I go someplace new, I have the same little chart of what I do, which is the same thing that I did when I came here. So it's, get to know the economic development people, right? Because they're the ones that are going to tell you where things are going or where things are heading. The county has been super helpful. Of course, we share a lot of services as a city with the county. And that about 4 years ago, the governor here came up with this plan of like the shared service initiative. So if you shared services, you would get money. Oh. And they were like, this is perfect, right? So in Broome County, I kind of played a role in that. So ever since then, I'm constantly looking, and sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. But that was my first like identification of like, how are we sharing services? What things happen? Found out a lot of our public safety is sharing. Mm-hmm. Especially with dispatch and things like that. So the county, absolutely, we are doing this reimagining public safety project, which involves the county also. We have some city specific things that we're doing with the police department, but we also have, some combined plans that involve the entire county, which is kind of cool because you get to see how other municipalities react to that. I will say that everybody has kind of, the community as a whole in Tompkins County has kind of reached out, wanting to know, what we're doing or how we can work together. We have a lot of things in common with the town, obviously, because we're the whole of the donut. I don't know another way to say that, but that's kind of how it goes. So I think that, the economic development side of this, which also falls into Green New Deal stuff and electrification, has been big, doing an electric kitchen, a community kitchen, things that awesome. Yeah, like things that we are building a conference center, finally after all these years. So so having people within the community that can benefit from all that has been amazing. And, like going from, because I know, and I probably have said this to the youth ambassadors, if they're on here, they're probably like rolling their eyeballs at me, but we have a relationship with students in the community that do projects and then they present them. And every time I talk to them, I always say, use your resources. Like there are so many things within the community that you can do. And people don't know where to go. And elected officials seem so not touchy-feely, right? Like people are afraid of you when you're a public official. And so
isn't that weird? That's so weird.
I'm like, we are the nicest people you will ever meet, but it is a misconception, the biggest misconception. And that you can't go as an everyday citizen you can't call a senator's office and say, hey, I want to come over. You can. And as a matter of fact, you should. And, and promoting your cause or promoting the issues. And so I've never been super afraid of that, I guess. So I think that was my other thing, is that a lot of people knew I was moving here. I reached out to the senators, state Senate and federal and Congress people and whatever, just to try to see what their perception is, because I don't know if you know this, but people think that Ithaca is full of money and just throwing cash around to everybody. And it's funny, when you get here, the southern tier region thinks one thing about Ithaca, and we brag about ourselves, right? Like every city brags about themselves, but when it comes to funding and government money and taxpayer money, you want to be realistic. And that's been a fine line to balance. Surprise, I didn't think I would have that hard of a time, but I was like, you want to tell people everything great about your city, and then realistically, there's projects like we have, and I did want to ask you about, the homeless issue. Like we do have an issue with that not everybody sees, unless you're in certain parts of town. Certainly not a lot of visitors to the area see that. I think that's more centered, but to prove that there's need within this community that everybody has this wonderful perception of has been challenging.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. I can see though how like compared to your neighbors, people would feel like Ithaca had resources and that might not really calibrate. I think I experienced that same dynamic, except that it's our residents that think government has a bunch of resources.
Oh, yes, that too.
Right. And in a way that we really don't. And we're really challenged. So our state legislature imposes on cities in Wisconsin both a levy limit on how much we can raise on the property tax, and the majority of our city budget is property tax, right? And so there's a very strict limit on how much we can put onto the property tax each year. It's a formula, and it's very strict. So it doesn't go up very much. And then we're also limited in how much we can spend, right? So there's they've got you squeezed in on both sides. And for years, we once they imposed these limits, we were able to raise different fees or find different sources of revenue, or find ways to make it work. So it didn't really hit in the same way. And now we're in a situation where every year our costs to continue, so just doing what we do, right, not adding anything new, is over what we can put on the levy, where the levy limit is by in the neighborhood of $10 to $20 million every year.
Wow. So
we have to find $10 to $20 million of new revenue, or we have to cut that from our budget somewhere. And so, people are like, well, why we want more bus service here, or we want, more affordable housing there, or we want, you to do something different with trash pickup here, or we want, why are you not spending money on? And I'm like, I don't have any money.
Yeah.
Don't have any money.
People don't get that. They don't get that.
Well, and we've done, not to brag too much, but for so many years, Madison has done such a good job. We provided really platinum level service.
Yeah.
So it's hard to not do that. But I see Rebecca is coming in to give us some new topics to talk about, but I wanted to speak to your question around homeless services. It's been a real challenge for Madison, like I think every other city. But the, one silver lining from the pandemic is that we really transformed our approach to serving people experiencing homelessness. And, we had congregate shelters in church basements, basically that was our situation, and that was not a viable thing during the pandemic. And so we have done a series of temporary shelters, which are much better. And we actually just announced a site for a permanent purpose-built shelter for men experiencing homelessness.
Oh, nice.
We also transformed a former nursing home into a family shelter. And we have the what used to be the women and family shelter is now the women's shelter. And that's run by the Salvation Army, and they have a plan to redevelop that site as well to be more purpose-built. But the biggest challenge for us has been, honestly, the people who are not willing to go into shelter and into a congregate situation. Yeah. And so we have one community group that builds tiny homes for people experiencing homelessness, and that's been very successful. And in fact, we used a little bit of our ARPA funding to put solar panels on the tiny homes.
Oh, nice. Okay.
To make them more sustainable. And then the other thing that we've done is sort of we bought 30 pallet shelters, which they're like tiny homes, but they're not permanent. They're a quick build pop-up shelter, and that's for folks that are unwilling to go into congregate shelter, and they can still get services. And we actually have had a couple of people move out into better housing situations.
Oh, that's great.
So, we're just trying to we're trying to look at what are the barriers for people and to access shelter, and how do we find options that they can access. And it's not easy, and it's certainly not cheap, but it's important. And I think we really, I just look at it like, we can't go back to the church basement situation and, letting people just sleep on the street. We have to push through to something better.
No, you're right.
I hate to redirect that conversation. We have a couple of questions about electric vehicles in the chat. One specifically about any plans to incorporate hydrogen vehicles into municipal fleets, if there are any existing plans. And then kind of more broadly, are there ways that Ithaca and Madison can work together around electric vehicles? I think the fire truck got some people thinking about, is there a way to maybe bulk purchase electric vehicles and leverage that buying power between two, may I say, very cool municipalities to get a better price, maybe?
Yeah. So, Faith, I'll take those, and then sure. you should add in. Sure. So I think we are not looking for hydrogen at this point. Just like the infrastructure involved, I think, is a little daunting. It seems to me like the push is really towards electrification, which is, of course, great until you look at what your source of electricity is, right? And so we have to be addressing the source of electricity at the same time. And we actually do have some solar-powered EV chargers that we use for our fleet and can deploy across the city. And that's something I'm interested in, as all this money is going to come down for the EV charging network. Thinking about how do we leverage that in the most sustainable way. But on the question of cooperation, actually, Climate Mayors, which is an organization that I'm a co-chair of, it's a national organization for mayors that are working on climate, has a purchasing consortium for electric vehicles. So we can get better prices collectively. That's sort of for a specific, mostly light duty vehicles. But I think as there get to be more of the heavy duty vehicles, we'll want to look at at doing just that. How do we work together to get better pricing? And we're so excited about our fire truck that we're happy to share with any municipality, certainly including Ithaca, what our experience has been, and when those are available, to support folks getting them. We also have a vested interest because it's a Wisconsin company.
Right, exactly. Which is good. And I think that one of the things is, just interested in, the public buy-in to this, right?
Yeah.
And I think that while we as a city can be like, okay, like this is a great idea, we're gonna do this is great. Some of the how do you talk to council about it? How do you get things, through? How do you get public support for some of this stuff? And it might not be for the fire vehicles, but it might be for some of the smaller stuff, because when they see the price tag, I think that sometimes hinders, people's support for that. So
we've had to really try and communicate the life cycle cost. And to be clear that in the long term, this is saving us money. Interestingly, maintenance a lot cheaper on EVs, a lot more straightforward. And so we're saving money there. And then, of course, talking about the climate impacts. I'm interested, though, we didn't even talk about buses.
I know.
That's a whole thing.
Far. We need another hour.
But we are committing. We're putting in a bus rapid transit system, and we're committing to be 100% electric on that, and then trying to on the replacement cycle, replace our other buses. But the differential in price between, like, we're able to do the BRT system because we're going to get a bunch of federal money on it. But the differential in price for diesel versus EV buses is significant, and difficult to have that conversation, internally, but then also at council and with the public.
Yeah.
So we're unfortunately out of time. I think, Faith, you're right. We need another hour to really dig into some of this stuff. But what we usually do at the end of these is we will pose a somewhat related question to both of you and give you both a chance to answer. So I'm going to ask you to put on your creative thinking caps and your dreaming caps for sure. If you had unlimited support and unlimited funding for one project, as big or as small as you can possibly imagine, for your municipality, what would it be?
Oh my God.
One project.
One project. One project.
So I would do buildings. I would do everything about sustainability for buildings. I would do energy efficiency, water efficiency, lead remediation, mold remediation, electrification. I would just do our building stock, because that's the hardest thing in my mind is, not municipal buildings. I can handle that, right? But like private sector, I think that is the most difficult, and also the most the longest time scale for change, right? So if we really want to make an impact on the climate, I think that's the place to push. Other things, I mean, transportation, like, it's a shorter time scale, right? So we can do that. But buildings feel very hard, particularly, like if I could use my unlimited support on one thing, like that's the place that I feel like I could really unstick, would be buildings.
Yeah, that resonates for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, because there's very little money out there for it, right? I mean, that's the thing. So you guys are gonna think I'm crazy. This isn't about the Green New Deal, but if I am realizing that mental health has taken a huge hit during COVID. and watching, my son's friends struggle and like all that kind of stuff, I really would in Ithaca, I think put a youth center, somewhere where there's mental health services. We do not have, and somehow come up with some kind of micro-credentialing program so that we could train people to be counselors and then put them right in there. So
yes.
I think that there is, I fear for the future with all these children having gone to school online and not adjusting very well to the real world. So that's mine.
That is so right on, Faith. I feel you so hard on that. I joke that really, instead of all this ARPA money for, it's all going to really good things. Don't get me wrong. And I am so thankful to have it. But like, could we just pay for therapy for everybody?
Right.
Because everybody needs it. And I also am quite worried about, what happens in our communities when people don't have the mental health support that they need.
Yeah. And I fear that we're going to see that effect in years to come, in the next, as they kind of age out of this public school system or the school systems. I worry how that's going to translate. So sorry, that was like ending on a terrible note. Ask us another question.
Madison and Ithaca, you heard it here first. Start gathering all of your money to support these two initiatives. Yeah, we'll check back in 3 years and see what sort of progress has been made on both of those projects. But in all seriousness, thank you both so much for taking the time out of your, here it's not such a beautiful Tuesday, but a beautiful day nonetheless. We're so appreciative that you were able to join us, and hopefully we'll see you both again soon, maybe on another Power Lunch. But thank you everybody on YouTube for joining us.